All right, so I have some updates for you guys on the war in Ukraine. Now, remember, every single time we talk about this stuff, you have to take it with a massive grain of salt because all of the news and information coming on the ground is subject to bias from both sides. So the Ukrainian officials have, a narrative that they'd like to weave. The Russian officials have a narrative that they'd like to weave. And so everything needs to be taken with a grain of salt. But having said that, with enough evidence that you can see with your own eyes, you can deduce some things here that are obviously true. So the Daily Mail says, now Putin bombs a disabled care home. Ukrainians claim Russians are killing more civilians than soldiers and have destroyed 48 schools. But Kyiv says it's breaking stranglehold on cities as another helicopter is blown out of the sky. Care home for the disabled near Kharkiv, near northeast Ukraine, hit by Russian shelling. Local officials say 63 of the home's 330 residents have been evacuated, whilst fate of other 267 is currently unknown. Came after Dnipro was hit in the early hours with strikes that destroyed a shoe factory and killed a civilian. But Ukrainian forces have been striking back, capturing 5 towns near besieged city of Chernihiv. So, again, take everything here with a grain of salt, because you could see it too in this headline. Like, the Ukrainians are trying to say, well, number one, we're like taking back cities and towns, and so like we're winning the war, but also at the same time, oh my God, the assault is so terrible and horrendous that 48 schools have been hit and all these other things have been hit, and they're massacring civilians, so on and so forth. So everything with a massive grain of salt. But having said that, there is no doubt that at least to some extent you have Russian forces attacking civilian infrastructure. So here it says they hit 48 schools. That's the claim of the Ukrainian officials. Now, let's go ahead and say they're inflating this. Let's go ahead and say that, right? Even if Russia hit, 7 schools? That's 7 schools too many. So, my typical rule of thumb, as you look through all the information that's coming out on the ground, is that you take whatever the Russian officials are saying, and you take whatever the Ukrainian officials are saying, and you split it right down the middle. So there was a time when Ukraine was saying we killed 6,000 Russian soldiers, and Russia said you only killed 500 of our soldiers, and I think the UN came out and said it's like 1,500 or 1,800 or something like that. So the truth was somewhere in the middle. Now, I don't know if 48 schools were actually hit, but I do know at least some schools were hit, and I do know at least some civilian infrastructure has been hit. And that's completely and utterly inexcusable. And we have more on that front, too. So the Red Cross has described the situation in the besieged Ukrainian city of Mariupol as apocalyptic, with residents cut off from food, water, power, and heat for over a week amid freezing temperatures. So, look, there's no doubt. Schools are being hit. There's one claim a disabled care center was hit. There's another claim that a maternity hospital was hit. There's all of these nightmare stories coming out. And let's just say, even if the stories are only 25% as bad as are being reported, these are out-and-out war crimes. That's what it is. And it should be the easiest thing in the world to condemn it and put a spotlight on it. Again, you don't have to take every claim at face value because we have the fog of war right now and you have 2 different narratives that they're attempting to weave. But fact of the matter is, there is definitely some targeting of civilian infrastructure happening, and that is a war crime and needs to stop immediately. And it's an absolute nightmare what's going down on the ground right now, no matter how you slice it or dice it. No matter how you view it or how you want to bias it in one direction or another, it is a nightmare. And the Russian forces are unleashing hell right now. Now, I will say, somebody weighed into the conversation here, and probably shouldn't have. So Hillary Clinton chimed in and said, if Russian leadership would rather not be accused of committing war crimes, they should stop bombing hospitals. Hillary, for the love of God, sit this one out. You are not helping. You are not helping at all. So, that's obvious. That's true. But this is the classic issue that happens, especially with elites in the United States, who, by the way, were also involved in war crimes. She was Secretary of State. She's a massive neoconservative hawk. She voted for the Iraq War, so on and so forth. How do we forget all these things so fast? Okay, so Alan McLeod lays this out for us. A short history of the United States deliberately bombing hospitals, a thread. 1. While Secretary of State, Clinton's State Department deliberately bombed a Doctors Without Borders hospital in Kunduz in northern Afghanistan, killing at least 30 people. You guys remember this? I remember covering this. Kunduz hospital bombing. U.S. news site was safe from Taliban, but bombed it anyway. claims MSF, that's Doctors Without Borders, inquiry. Wow. Accounts from the organization claim there was no military justification for the U.S. airstrike on the 3rd of October that killed 30 medical staff and patients. I remember this. It was a huge deal. It was a big story. Unfortunately, mainstream media didn't cover it nearly as much as they should have, but we did on this channel. Number 2, hospitals in Iraq were also a frequent target throughout the ongoing U.S. occupation. The strike on a Baghdad hospital killed or injured dozens of medical staff. More. In 1993, Hillary's husband Bill oversaw the repeated shelling of a Somali hospital, killing many dozens of people. 34 Somalis hurt as mortars hit near Mogadishu Hospital. Number 4, the U.S. originally tried to deny that it targeted a mental hospital in Grenada during its 1983 invasion, before finally conceding that it did indeed destroy it. The attack killed at least 12 people, but more likely it was closer to 50, as this New York Times article explains. Okay, so I'm not going to continue here. Obviously, he's going way back in time to the 1980s. Hillary wasn't in power in the 1980s, so I have less of an interest in that. He's just making the case, look, you can't be the imperial juggernaut, war crimes regime and turn around and say, ooh, war crimes. Now, again, I don't like it when people make this point to then turn around and downplay what Russia's doing in Ukraine. That is whataboutism, and that's a deflection, that's obscuring, and that's annoying, and also morally bankrupt. So that's not the reason I'm making the point. The reason I'm making the point is to say, and this shouldn't be controversial to anybody with a brain, it's bad when Russia does it, and it's bad when the United States of America does it. But when somebody like Hillary Clinton weighs in and tries to, get a slam dunk and score some cheap points, it's like you're only making the situation worse. Because then everybody gets to turn around and say, look at you hypocrites. You don't even care about this issue as such. You don't even care about imperialist war crimes, bombing of hospitals. You care about it only when Russia does it. You care about it only when you can point at the official enemy baddie nation and say, they're bad because they do it. Well, guess what? You guys did it too, and you did it a lot. And the fact of the matter is, George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, Hillary Clinton, all the U.S. imperialists should be behind bars in The Hague, and so should Vladimir Putin. And again, if you think any part of this is controversial, your mind has been warped by either ideology or, an endless barrage of propaganda. Because the fact of the matter is, every single thing you see here that Russia's doing, even if you say it's only 50% as bad as they're reporting, even if it's only 25% as bad as they're reporting, well, guess what? These are crimes. These are war crimes. And he's a war criminal. And he should be in The Hague. But exact same thing goes for Hillary Clinton. I mean, you can't decry this sort of stuff when you guys directly engaged in it. Directly did it. So, here's my hot take for the day. Any hospital bombers should probably be behind bars at best.